So, hi everyone. Today we are talking about Brooding Heroes. We'll be pulling some examples from YA, I'm sure, but Brooding Heroes really happen in a variety of age groups for reading and books and TV shows. So, we're going to talk today about the Brooding Hero, what it is, and why we think it's used by authors and scriptwriters and things like that. So, let's start with kind of defining what we mean by brooding hero. You want to start?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, for me, the brooding hero is, typically you find it, I think, more in YA than in adult, but definitely in adult literature too. But it's the sort of introspective, almost borderline depressive, kind of reluctant hero that brood, save the day, brood some more. So just kind of not necessarily a grumbly, mean kind of guy, but someone who's just very introspective to the point that it's almost a character trait. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I would just add to that usually where I see it happen the most, especially in books, but also in TV shows, is where the brooding hero is not the main character. He might be one of the main supporting characters, but he's usually kind of walled off in mystery because he's not the main character. So you don't know the reason for his brooding usually right away. You just think he's a jerk, or you think he's like self-absorbed or really moody. And then usually, eventually, it's revealed that there's a reason for the broodiness, either slowly or like in some kind of revelation that the main character finds. And then, of course, that character becomes really likable because you feel sympathy for whatever this reason is that they're brooding. And that's usually, if you're dealing with a love triangle and a brooding hero is part of a love triangle,
that's a love situation in that, like a love triangle square.
Yeah.
Of some sort.
If there's a love triangle involved, that's usually the point at which the viewers or the readers really start rooting for that character, because he seemed like a jerk, but now they understand why, and he's just hurting, and it makes him really, really sympathetic as a character.
Now you've broken through to his little gooey center.
Yes. Yeah. And
it's all better.
Yes. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why this trope exists and why we think it works, why it's appealing, why authors and scriptwriters use it. And I think part of it is that it's the fact that it makes the character really sympathetic. So it's a way of kind of setting up like suspense and intrigue. By this character being mysterious and just a jerk, it also builds tension. But then once you realize the reason, it makes the character really likable. So it's a really good way of pulling the reader or the viewer in and making them feel bonded to the character. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, but just analyzing why it works, I think it
eliminates the human condition in a way, because everybody has secrets, everybody has a past and things that have affected the way they live their life. So you can kind of automatically connect with a flawed character like that, or not necessarily flawed, but a character who is, mysterious and moody. And because I think everybody's been there at some point where, stuff is weighing on you, but you can't really talk about it. And it's just, it's a really humanizing character, I think, in a book. It makes it realistic versus having all these characters who are either very vocal about their traumas or just completely, totally walled off and nothing. Like, there's something going on with this person, but like everybody that you pass every day, there's always something going on with somebody, but you don't know what that is. And I think it just kind of highlights that's a common trait for people, that we all kind of brood at some point. So it's relatable.
I think that makes sense. I know that I usually end up I usually end up rooting for the brooding characters before the reason for their brooding is even revealed, because I feel like clearly they've got something going on, and that is relatable.
I'm gonna love them.
Yeah. Hopefully when they reveal what it is, it'll be something not horrible, and I'm rooting for them even before I know, usually. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we could talk about some examples from, I guess we could start with books and then we'll do TV shows later, maybe.
Yeah. There's tons of course, when we're trying to brainstorm examples, we can't think of any. But the first one that came to mind was the Hunger Games, because Katniss was kind of the epitome of both the brooding and reluctant hero. She obviously, nobody wants any part of these of the games, and she volunteered for her sister out of love, obviously, but that doesn't mean she wants to be there. And I guess she has every reason to be brooding and sort of closed off. And I just thought she was a really good example of that. Of course, in the beginning of that series, you kind of have this general idea of why she's brooding. I mean, her life is difficult, to say the least. And it has kind of formed her into this closed off sort of, I don't want to say depressive, even though it probably was depressing for her at the time. I kind of hate making that a personality trait for somebody, but yeah, it definitely thought of her as like this brooding heroine, because I don't think there's any point in the series where she's really truly happy until the end. Like her outlook on life can change, and she cannot be broody. She can have hope, and she can look to the future. So that was one that I thought of.
Yeah, and Gale is pretty broody in there too.
Okay. Yeah, kind of the same, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, he has a shared experience with Katniss from both of them coming from the same district, and like the life that they've had and how hard it's been. Mm-hmm. But then whenever Katniss goes off on her, hero's journey to the Hunger Games, he gets like even broodier. So then whenever they reconnect, it's like he's just increasingly kind of falling into that brooding pit that he never quite comes back out of. And at some point he actually, to me, became less sympathetic because he kind of crossed the line. Like, you're brooding, like you can feel for him, but then he chooses to kind of wallow in that and pull toward revenge more. So for me, that eventually became less sympathetic.
Yeah. Like at some point, I can't remember what book it is. It's either second or third one. I think it's the third one. His life kind of becomes being a soldier and fighting against, like, that's the thing that he grasps onto. And being in constant fight mode is probably not the healthiest place to be if you're already, coming from a bad position. But Peter never really seemed very broody to me. I mean, he had his moments, but we all do, I think. But yeah, Gale and Katniss were definitely the two. But I saw her as a heroine. I didn't really see Gale so much as a hero, because he just, he did heroic things. And we won't talk about what happened to Finnick, because I'm still mad about that. We're not going to talk about that.
I guess I consider Gale a hero only because he's set up in the book sort of as the other side of her love triangle. So he's given a place of importance in the book, even though he's not really driving the plot. But
what else we got?
Well, the quintessential example that I'm only going to mention briefly, because we have probably way overanalyzed this series so far, is Edward from Twilight. And I do just want to take a second to acknowledge the fact that Edward and the Twilight series in general was hugely influential in the entire YA book scene. YA paranormal didn't really exist as a genre like it does now before that. So I do want to give credit to the series for sort of creating this trope within YA. Not that it doesn't happen, because the brooding hero even happens in Hallmark movies. It's not just a YA thing. Yep. But I do want to give credit to the series for the impact that it had in like the specific tropes that you see in YA, because they really are, and this is a good point to mention. This is a perfect time to mention the Brooding YA Hero account on Twitter, because this is what it is. There are these overlapping characteristics of the Brooding Hero when it's in YA. And it almost becomes like a joke to readers who, and it's joked about in a positive way, because readers still love these stories. But there's an account on Twitter that's called Brooding YA Hero. And if you haven't checked it out, I just told MJ about it this morning, and she looked it up and she's like, oh, I'm gonna have to read this later. I don't follow it anymore because I stopped using Twitter a couple of years ago, because I was just flooded with notifications all the time. But it's really, really amusing. But the whole point of this profile on Twitter is to pretend to be the Brooding YA Hero. So most of the posts are playing off of these typical tropes, like describing the eyes as like turquoise oceans, and like just the descriptors, sandalwood and musk that's like on his clothes, like, but he's breaking the fourth wall, like describing himself, because he is the YA hero. So it's an amusing account. If you want to check it out, it's just Brooding YA Hero. But I think that Edward was sort of the inception of these particular tropes that you see a lot in the YA genre when you're dealing with a brooding hero. So
for the rest of us, for sure.
I also, when we were trying to brainstorm examples, Divergent came to mind. 4 is a fairly brooding hero for the majority of that series. And then there's also some indie series that have really good examples of brooding heroes, especially YA series. The Selection, which is like on the shelf behind you, the Selection series. There's a brooding hero in that one, and he's sort of not so brooding at first. He gets more withdrawn at certain points in the series, and then you find out that there is a reason to his broodiness, and he becomes really sympathetic at that point. And then the other thing I thought of was a series that I'm rereading by Sarah Nofke, I think is how you pronounce her name. She's an indie author, but she has this Dream Travelers story world that she has multiple series in. And in the Lucidites, and I think in the Reverians, although it's been a while since I read it, there's also a brooding hero in there. In the Lucidites, there's 2 of them who are brooding to varying degrees at different times. I don't know
if I can handle that much in one book.
It's like she's right in the middle of she's sort of a brooding heroine as well, because she's like thrust into this life she never wanted. And so, she is as well. But she's like in the middle of the love triangle, and at times, depending on what drama and tension is going on, the other points of the love triangle are either happy or really upset and brooding. So
that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
But it really does make all of the characters, I mean, one, it builds tension, which is important, but it also makes all of the characters feel realistic, and it keeps the dynamics of the story feeling like engaging and sympathetic, because like you said earlier, everybody has moments where they're like just really unhappy with their current situation. Mm-hmm. Not all characters are brooding as like a deep core character trait, but some of them are. Like 4. I would probably put him in that.
Yeah. That's another one we don't talk about.
We'll
on a tangent of how angry it makes me.
We will discuss the Divergent series in another video because we have specific things about that plot that we would like to analyze.
I might have to read it. But yeah, you'll be a hole in my wall if I have to reread that series. Or just
we can probably just talk from memory in general and just not get into specifics.